Hey everyone, I think I'm live. How's it going? Hi everyone, I'm Kendra Perry. Welcome to Monday's live masterclass on my Facebook page. I am Kendra Perry, and if this is your first time joining me for a live video, welcome. I am a functional diagnostic nutritionist with a big love for female hormones, GI health, and of course detox, my very favorite topic. And if you guys are interested in seeing any other of my videos or any of my previous videos, last week we talked about detox. If you're interested in learning more about detox, you can just click the videos on the little left side menu on my Facebook page, and you can see all the videos I've done so far. And if you want to learn more about me, if you want to contact me, my website is kendraperry.net. Okay, so today we're going to be diving into a topic that I'm actually really excited to talk about, mostly because it goes against pretty much everything I've taught in the past. And, you know, I love kind of getting proven wrong. I love learning that something maybe I was promoting wasn't maybe the best thing, because there's a lot to be learned from it. And so I'm really excited today to talk about intermittent fasting. It's something I've been employing in my own life. I haven't started recommending it with clients yet, but I've been really digging into the research and doing a lot of reading about it. And I'm starting to think that this is actually maybe a really interesting technique to employ that not only help with things like weight loss, but also energy and just overall brain function. So there's a lot of really good research on intermittent fasting these days. So today we're going to go into intermittent fasting, what it is and how you can get started, and if it's something that you should try to help boost your energy levels and maybe even lose a few pounds. But I want to talk a little bit, because if you guys have followed me for a while, if you're someone who's been around for a while, you've probably heard me preach about the BAB, which is what I call the big ass breakfast. Okay, so this is actually something I've been pushing for a long time in my recent hormone program, and with a lot of my clients, I tell people, like, you need to eat this big ass breakfast, right? Because that's going to set up blood sugar control for the day. And this was mostly based off the fact that I thought that only carbs and sugar really raised insulin, because protein and fat don't really have a massive effect on blood sugar levels, but they do affect insulin, which is interesting. So my thoughts were, okay, if you eat a breakfast that's, this big ass dinner for breakfast, and it's really heavy in fat and protein, but low in carbs and sugar, then this is going to set you up for the day. And it definitely is better than eating a donut or eating a big carb breakfast, absolutely. But what I've since learned upon doing a lot of research is that all food pretty much stimulates insulin production, okay? So whether it's fat, protein, carbs, everything is getting an insulin response. And what is insulin? So insulin is a storage hormone, and basically you need insulin to be able to utilize the energy that you're bringing into your body. And when we eat, we're always eating more energy than we actually need at that exact moment in time. So we do need to store it. And that's what insulin does. It is a storage hormone. So every time we're eating, that energy has to be stored, because we can't, unless we're doing like excessive amounts of exercise in that moment as we're eating, we can't use all that energy. So it actually needs to be stored for later, okay? So when insulin is storing the energy that we eat, it's taking those different macronutrients, carbs, sugar, fat, and it's converting them into glucose, which is then stored in the liver as fat, and then eventually is converted into fat cells, okay? So what I've learned is that, no matter what we're eating, every time we eat, we are initiating this insulin response. And insulin in general is, pretty much associated with every single chronic illness on the planet. Really, the healthiest thing for us to do is actually to minimize the amount of time that we're actually secreting insulin. The less insulin that we use, the better it is for us. We know this by looking at type 1 diabetics who are on insulin therapy. The people who are on the higher dosages have a way worse outcome long-term than the people who are taking the lowest dose necessary as possible. Because insulin, in the end, if we use too much of it, can lead to a lot of chronic illness. So I think this is a really big argument and issue for people who are eating multiple meals in the day. I know there's a lot of information out there that's telling you to eat 6 meals a day plus snacks or whatever it is, to eat these small meals throughout the day. Like, yes, that is going to keep our blood sugars stable because we're eating all day long, but it's also producing an insulin response with every single time that you're eating that snack or meal. And then on top of that, our gut or our digestive system is actually never getting a break between digesting. And digestion is actually probably one of the most energy intensive tasks that we do. So, you got to think about like what's going on in the body if all you ever do is digest. You're always digesting. Like, when does your body have time to detox or put energy into rebuilding or other tasks when such a huge portion of its energy is always going into digesting? Okay. So, when I started learning about this stuff, I started getting interested in this. If you guys have followed me for a while, you may have heard me discuss some of my weight issues. So I definitely am implementing intermittent fasting, hoping to lose a few pounds. I have gained weight in the past couple years. I did go through a pretty significant time of stress and overwhelm with my business, and that did lead to weight gain. And, weight gain is a tricky thing to deal with. It does a lot on our self-esteem, and yeah, it's really hard to accept when we are gaining more weight. But of course, if I'm going to lose weight, I want to do it a healthy way, a way that I know is good for my body. So I've actually been employing intermittent fasting to help with weight loss. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that. So I want to talk about what intermittent fasting actually is. And to start, I actually want to talk a little bit about what it isn't. So intermittent fasting, or fasting in general, is not starvation. Okay. So starvation is this involuntary abstention from eating food. People who are starving have no control, when their next meal is going to come. They have absolutely no control over it. So that is not the same as fasting, because this is 100% under your control. It is deliberate. And that is a really important distinction. Okay. So with fasting, we're not starving. We're just abstaining from eating for certain set periods of time in order to activate certain pathways in our body that do lead to fat burning. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference. So with intermittent fasting, basically you are going through certain periods of time where you are not eating. It's not a diet, it's not eat this, not this. It's basically just abstaining from eating over a certain amount of time. So, when we're sleeping, we're technically fasting, right? But a lot of us actually don't tend to go too long between meals without eating. So maybe you eat dinner at 8 at night and then you eat breakfast in the morning at 7 a.m. So you're getting an 11-hour fast, which really isn't that long. So with intermittent fasting, we really start to extend the time that we're not eating and then shorten the window in which we are eating. So currently I'm doing a 16-hour fast every single day. Sometimes I do more. So I would say 16 hours is probably the minimum, although that's not where you want to start. We always want to start slow and work up to it. But you can go longer. And sometimes I actually try to do what's called the warrior fast, which is I try to eat within a 4-hour window. So shorter window, and then I'm fasting for 20 hours of that day. Okay. And I want to talk a little bit about the distinction between fasting and actually calorie restriction. So fasting does tend to, ultimately lead to a bit of calorie restriction, right? Because we are eating in a shorter meal, we're skipping a meal or even two. So we really have less opportunity to eat. So therefore we do tend to consume less calories. So this is different than calorie restriction, which just involves restricting your calories throughout the day. Okay. And this actually does lead to very different processes in your body. Okay. So it's well documented in research that calorie restriction, so just restricting your calories throughout the day, ultimate will lead to a reduction in the basal body temperature. Okay, so in a reduction of our metabolism. So when your metabolism goes down, so does your body temperature. And when you're doing calorie restriction throughout the day, then you do actually see a reduction in your metabolic rate. Okay. And this is actually something, so if you guys remember, I don't know if it's actually still on, but the show, The Biggest Loser. So that's a show, if you're not familiar with it, where overweight people, it's for, they film it for a TV show. And these people go through severe calorie restriction and lots of exercise. And basically they transform their bodies, they lose weight, and then somebody wins. And I don't know what winning is based off of, but these people get really fit. But if you look at the contestants of The Biggest Loser, almost every single one of them, I think except for one, has actually gained all the weight back plus more. So they all gained, lost hundreds of pounds, some of them, but they all gained it back. And this is actually because of this reduction in the basal metabolic rate. Okay. So over time, when you're, restricting calories, your body can't really keep up with that long term. So it's always getting less energy than it requires to actually function. So it's like, okay, so this is where that sort of starvation mode comes in. So it starts to downregulate, it starts to slow things down so that you don't actually require as much energy as you did previously because you're not giving your body enough energy to function. But what's really interesting is, I think people assume that this is the same thing that actually happens with intermittent fasting or fasting, and it's actually not. And I find that really interesting because they're very similar, but they're different. And with intermittent fasting, the research has actually shown that when you go through more of like a feast or famine cycle, that you tend to increase your metabolic rate. And I think this is probably maybe more in line with, from an ancestral perspective, like what our species has gone through. Because you kind of think of it like if you're constantly restricting calories, if you say you're always eating like 1,500 calories a day, your body gets used to that. And it's like, okay, I'll only have this amount of calories in the day. So I know that's what I've got. So let's kind of bring things back. Let's reduce things. Let's wind things down, so that we're reducing our energy expenditure and our energy needs so that we can adapt to that 1,500 calories. Whereas with like a feast and sort of famine cycle, when you're going, periods of time without eating and then you're eating food, the body knows like, okay, we're going through this famine. We're not going to have food during this time, but we need to find food because food's not always available. So it's actually going to increase the metabolic rate to give you the strength and energy you need to find food. And so that's actually what's been shown in the research, and it's actually pretty well documented that fasting actually tends to speed up the metabolic rate rather than reduce it with prolonged and consistent calorie restriction. So I think that's really, really interesting. And, I think, we really got to consider the fact that fasting is not starvation, or intermittent fasting is not starvation, because a lot of us actually have extra weight on our body. So I have extra fat on my body right now, but if I never give my body the opportunity to burn it, if I'm constantly giving it an influx of food, it's always going to burn the energy from the food I'm giving it, rather than actually get down into the fat that I have on my body and utilizing it, right? Because when you think about it, losing weight is a very unnatural process. Our bodies are designed for feast and famine. Our body typically, genetically does not want to lose weight. It wants to hold it just in case we go through a period of starvation and we actually need it in the future, okay? So there's been a lot of research that shows that fasting actually, increases our metabolic rate, so it speeds up our metabolism. It's also been shown to boost energy levels and brain function. So there's a lot of really cool things going on with intermittent fasting. And I think a lot of people, when I tell people what I'm doing, they're always like, well, isn't that unhealthy? Okay. And I don't actually think it is. I think it's a very natural thing to follow a feast and famine pattern, mostly because what I said before, humans have done this feast and famine thing for pretty much as long as we have existed. And if fasting was, inherently unhealthy for us, then how would we have survived for so long? Humans probably went really long periods of time without food. And so during that time, if the body just slowed down metabolic rate and made people more tired and more sluggish and more unable to get out there and find food, then I don't actually think humans would have survived, right? So I think that's why when we're fasting, the body is actually increasing metabolic rate. It's giving us that incentive and motivation to get out there and find food, okay? And so I think, when we're fasting, we're actually giving our body the opportunity to get in there and access some of these fat stores, okay? And this is really interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about the longest fast that has ever been done. So guess, how long, let me know in the comments if you're watching the replay, how long do you think the longest fast ever to be done was? It was 382 days. Or something like that. I might be wrong, but it was about 300 and something days. It was longer than a year. So this was, I believe he was about 400 or 450 pounds, and he fasted for 382 days. Yes, he did take salt and some minerals just to make sure he was getting that, but he fasted for that long. I think he went down to 180 pounds and he gained back maybe 15 pounds. So I think he went back up to 195, but he did never gain back all that weight that he had on while he was fasting. And according to the study, there weren't any negative effects that were found. So I think that's really interesting. And obviously, like, me and you, if we're not like extremely overweight or obese, we probably don't want to be fasting for that long. But, I think it's really interesting. And that's why fasting is not starvation, because if you have extra body weight on your body has actually been storing that fat for a reason. And, you know, during that 382 days, that man's body just ate the fat that he had built up on his body. So I think that's really, really interesting. Okay. So I also want to talk a little bit about fasting in relation to small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So you guys may be familiar with this condition, but basically it's a condition where normal flora from the large intestine migrate up into the small intestine, and then they cause a lot of dysbiosis and overgrowth and malabsorption of carbohydrates because they're in the small intestine, and that's actually not where they belong. And so what's really interesting is what actually prevents SIBO from happening. So what prevents some of that bacteria from migrating up the large intestine into the small intestine is what's called the migrating motor complex. And it's basically like a rippling effect. It happens, the nerves do it, and it kind of like sends the bacteria, it like flushes them back down. So when bacteria kind of start climbing up, it flushes them back down. But you have to go 160 minutes in between meals in order for this to happen. So I think when we're eating all day, we rarely allow time for the migrating motor complex to kind of kick into gear. So I actually started to think if maybe intermittent fasting is a really, really good idea for people who are struggling with small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So allowing a significant amount of time for those nerves to rebalance and for the migrating motor complex to get back in gear and start flushing down some of that bacteria. Because we're constantly eating, we actually can't access that process, and then that bacteria can actually climb back up. So I'm wondering if it does have some really interesting applications for small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Okay, so if you are interested in starting to fast, I do recommend that you start slow. There are definitely people who should not fast. If you're underweight or malnourished, fasting is not for you. If you're under 18, fasting is not for you because this is a growth period. This is when your body is growing, your brain is growing. So you do need a constant influx of food, of good, healthy foods. And if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. So times of growth, times when we're going through periods of growth, these are not times to be fasting. Okay. But if those don't apply to you, then fasting is probably very safe for you. But if you are someone who gets hangry, if you're someone who does deal with really reactive hypoglycemia, you are going to have to go slow. Although in the long term, intermittent fasting can really help with this. So I'm someone who got hangry. My blood sugar would dip. I felt like I needed to be eating constantly in order to keep things stable and not be going through that irritable, hangry mess that I was turning into. So I did have to start slow, but now I actually don't get that. I actually can go pretty long periods of time without eating and actually feel 100% stable. But, you know, it didn't happen overnight. So start with a 12-hour fast. So if you eat dinner at 7, don't eat breakfast till 7 the next morning, or vice versa. If you eat breakfast at 7, wait until after 7 at night to eat dinner. So make sure you're getting that 12-hour fast. I find it's actually easiest to skip breakfast, which is funny because I'm the BAB girl, I'm the big ass breakfast girl, but I'm not doing that anymore. I'm actually skipping breakfast. You can skip dinner too. You can do it that way as well. The reason I don't like to skip dinner because it's more of a social meal. It's when I hang out with friends or my partner. So I like to eat dinner. Dinner is I like it way more than breakfast. So I like to skip breakfast, but basically start with that 12 hours of fasting and slowly increase it. And it might take you time. You don't need to do this quickly. That is not the goal. It's not a race, but just start slowly and move till maybe you're eating within an 8-hour window or you're fasting for about 16 hours a day. And that's when you'll start to get those weight loss benefits, is that about a 16-hour fast. Okay. But it is slow with 16-hour intermittent fast. What I've read online, and I know it's going to be different for everyone, but I've learned that maybe you'll lose like half a pound every 2 weeks. So, you know, it's going to be different. Obviously, there's a lot of things involved in weight loss, but, you know, with the 16-hour fast, it is a really slow and steady sort of weight loss. Okay. But start with that 16-hour fast. And if you can push that eating window even shorter, if you can get that eating, you know, from 8 hours to 6 to even 4 hours, you're going to get way more benefit. So I always do a minimum of a 16-hour fast every single day. But occasionally, I'll try to push that further. So my goal now is to actually eat within a 4-hour window. So I'm trying to fast for about 20 hours each day and then eat within a 4-hour window. I don't do that every day. It kind of depends. And, you know, on the weekends, sometimes I don't fast at all, especially if I'm doing a big hiking trip, or if I'm wanting to go out for breakfast with friends. Like on the weekends, I may not fast depending on what's going on, but I always get back into it after that time has passed. Okay. And, you know, I've noticed some really, really amazing results. My digestion feels really, really good. I'm someone who has had issues with SIBO in the past, and my gut just feels really good in general. I really like that feeling of being empty. I also love how my whole life doesn't really revolve around food anymore. Because when I was eating 3 meals a day at very healthy whole foods meals, it's a lot of effort to put into food. I was pretty much, you know, putting all this effort into each meal. Then in between meals, I was thinking about the next meal. And now I don't really have that constant preoccupation with food, which is pretty cool. I eat my one meal and then I don't think about it until I'm eating my next meal, which might be, you know, quite a ways later. You don't have to do the intermittent fasting daily. There's also such thing as an alternate day fasting where maybe you fast for 24 hours and then you eat for a full day and then you fast for 24 hours and you eat for a full day. That does tend to get faster results for weight loss. So if weight loss is a big goal of yours, then that might be a good place to start. And what I've actually been doing is I've been doing my 16-hour daily fast, and then I do a 24-hour fast 1 or 2 days a week. And I usually do dinner to dinner because I like to eat every day, and it actually isn't that bad. So I'll eat dinner at like 7 o'clock, and then I'll eat dinner again at 7 o'clock the next day. So I actually don't find it that bad. The first time I did it, it wasn't the easiest. I was very much aware of every single hour passing, but now I actually don't find it too hard at all, and I just sort of naturally do it. Okay, so before I sign off here, I want to talk a little bit more about the benefits of fasting and detox. So in my last video, definitely listen to that one. It's in my videos on my page. It's called Detox is a Dirty Word. But fasting is actually a really important part of detox because a lot of the chemicals and toxins that we store in our body are actually stored in fat cells. And so the only way for us to immobilize those toxins and get them out of the body in some cases is actually to burn those fat cells. So calorie restriction is a big part of this, but of course, as we've learned earlier in this video, calorie restriction, when we're doing it constantly throughout the day, leads to the reduction of the basal metabolic rate, which in the end will actually prevent detox. We need to have a high metabolism in order to detox. So, but with fasting, it actually increases the metabolic rate, and it actually does have some calorie restriction. So we are bursting and burning those fat cells. So anytime you're fasting, you are going to be immobilizing toxins. So this is really great for detox, but we do actually need to take steps so that we don't reabsorb those toxins. And so anytime you're fasting, if you decide to get into fasting and kind of do what I'm doing, definitely make sure you're taking a detox binder. So a binder is something that will bind to those toxins and make sure that they are pulled out of the body rather than getting recirculated and reabsorbed into the tissues. So I've talked a lot about binders, but my favorite one is modified citrus pectin. My favorite is Econugenix Pectisol C. That's the one I personally use and recommend to most of my clients. Chitosan is a really good one. It does come from shellfish. So if you have a fish allergy, that's not going to be for you. I also love activated coconut charcoal, psyllium husk, and I like zeolite as well. So those are the main binders, also bentonite clay. So those are the main binders that I use with clients. And if you do decide to do intermittent fasting, you are going to be increasing the rate at which you are dumping toxins into the body. So you do want to be taking those binders, okay? So, yeah, so I think with fasting, I think it's a really interesting thing. I am using it for weight loss. I have no idea it has led to weight loss because I haven't owned a scale in so long, but I am going to purchase a scale and I'm going to start tracking this, and I am going to keep you guys updated on if it's actually helping with that. I feel like it has. I feel lighter, but I can't confirm it. I don't have the data. So I'm going to let you guys know. And if you guys are trying fasting or if this is something you do, let me know. Send me a comment. Let's talk about this because I think it's really interesting and I think it could benefit a lot of people. And if you want to learn more about fasting, a really good book, I'm just going to grab it. So this is the book that I read first to learn about fasting. It's by Jimmy Moore and Jason Fung. Really good information here. They go through lots of the research as to, you know, why fasting is safe, why it makes sense, you know, all the benefits it can cause for our body. It's a really good book. They have some recipes in here and they pretty much tell you everything. So I do recommend reading that if you're interested in fasting, but you're still feeling skeptical about it. But yeah, I think this is a really cool thing. I'm probably going to start doing it with clients once I get a little bit more information about it. But if you have questions about this video, I'm doing a weekly Q&A. It will not be this week. because I am out of town, but it will be not this Thursday, but next Thursday. So if you have questions, comment on this video or send me a message through my Facebook page, or you can email us support@kendraprairie.net, and we'll make sure to get that answered during next week's Q&A. Okay, thanks for listening. If you like this video, let me know. Let me know if you have any questions. And if you want to learn more, head to my website at kendraprairie.net. Okay, guys, I hope you guys have a lovely week. Take care. Bye, everyone.